Alright, so here we have a new LeetCode question. Today we're going to be solving an easy level question. It's called 136 single numbers. So we're given a non-empty array of integers, okay? So we can expect only integer values. Now every element appears twice except for once. So we have some sort of behavior to expect, and that is that we can expect every element to appear twice except for one. And that's what the whole question is about. It's supposed to find that one exception. All right. Now, if we look here, all right, you can see that we have some input values, and in here we have two elements that appear twice and only one element which appears one time. So you can see that it follows that, kind of general rule of the elements appearing twice and then except for one. Same thing here. Same thing here, right? Um, but in this case, there's only one element. That would work too still, because technically one element is allowed to only have one occurrence, right? But if there was another element, for example, let's say two, then it wouldn't be allowed because you would need one of those elements, one or two, to have one more occurrence so that it fits this criteria. So if I go back in here, let's just jot down all the things that we kind of have here. So we have a nums array, all right? Now this array is our variable, okay? And it just contains all our numbers, right? Pretty simple. Now we have a behavior that we can expect. Okay, now we have a behavior that we can expect from our number array, and that is that all elements, right? All elements will show twice, I believe. Yeah, will show twice, except one, right? That is the behavior that we can expect from all of our arrays, okay? So now let's go ahead and start this out. So the first thing that I'd want to do is I want to keep track of my amount of occurrences that are occurring, right? Because the whole idea of this problem is to keep track of the occurrences, because there is a special number in your array that only has one occurrence, right? So you can't just magically figure out how many occurrences each element has. You have to keep track of them, right? So we can do that with a data structure, all right? And this data structure in Python is called a dictionary, all right? But in the CS world, it's also called a hash map, okay? And it lets you store key value pairs, okay? So you can store key value pairs. Pretty simple stuff, all right? And a key value pair is just a key, right? For example, let's say a car is associated with its corresponding value. Let's say that is like Volvo, right? Pretty simple. That's just how the data structure works. And this works perfect for us, this type of data structure. And I'll tell you why. It's because the key can actually represent the number itself, the element itself, and the value can represent the number of occurrences. The number of occurrences for that number, right? So the point of key value pairs is to represent information that correlates with each other, right? So information that is related to each other. Okay, so now that we know that this is how we're going to be structuring our data, let's actually try and model how the algorithm and sorts would look like, all right? So I already talked about how we need to figure out the special number that only shows once, right? So what we'd first do is we would actually iterate over your array, all right? So pretend this array is just 1, 1, and 2, just for simplicity reasons, okay? Now in this array, what we will do is we will actually iterate over each of these elements at least one time. And the reason for this is to put them into, or append them into, a new data structure, which is our hash map or dictionary. Doesn't really matter what you call it. They can be interchangeable, but you're going to store it into the data structure, that data structure, right? So then this data structure is going to have, the key value pair of 1, and it's going to have 2, and then the key of 2, and the value of 1. The reason for this, if you didn't realize, is that we are using the data model that we set up, right? We set up a data model where the key would be the actual number, and then the value would be the number of occurrences for that key. Over here, that's the same thing. The key is the number itself, right? 1 over here, and then the value is the number of occurrences, which is 2. Same thing here. The actual number represented in the array is 2, right? And the number of occurrences is 1, right? And then once we have this data, right, so we're going to iterate over it through a for loop, right? That's how you iterate over arrays, right? You use a for loop, right? So after that's done, right, we're going to employ another additional for loop on the HashMap data structure itself, okay? And we're going to employ an additional for loop, and this for loop is going to be, all right, is going to be on the values, or sorry, the items. So that would be these two of the HashMap itself. You use the .items method in Python to get that. And what we're going to be doing is, I'm actually just going to delete these two things. They're bugging me. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be mapping over it, right? We use .items to get, these different items within our hash map. And in every iteration of these items, right, we're going to define two variables, okay? So we're going to define a key and a value, and they're going to be mapped to either the key or the value, right? Now, the same process would apply for this over here. But then what we can do is we can iterate over, again, same process as before. We're going to iterate over, different color. We're going to iterate over each of these items, and we just want to see, the only criteria that we have here is we want to see if 1, right, the value 1 is there, right? If the value is equal to 1, that means that it has to be that value. So in our case, we would iterate over to this key value pair first. We'd be like, okay, is the value 1 in this key value pair? No, we don't care about this. Discard it. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, does this one have a key value pair of 1? Yes, it does. So this is good to go. Okay, so that's the basic logic and kind of like a visualization of how everything works. Okay, now let's actually code the system out and see how we can do. Because this is not the most efficient system out there. There's probably much better solutions out there, and I'm actually going to look at them on the LeetCode website itself. But this is just to kind of help you understand hash maps, like the data structure of hash maps, because they are a integral part of computer science, right? But yeah, and they're extremely fast too, right? That's another thing. They're extremely fast, but they add something called memory or space complexity to your application. But I think that is a fair trade-off. But even with that fair trade-off, it's just the logic over here, like the plain logic, which is causing the inefficiency of having to iterate over two different sets of information, right? Because you're iterating over the array first, and then you're iterating over the hash map again, right? So maybe the logic isn't the best out there, but it worked for me. Anyways, going back over here, this is how you would solve it. So you'd start off by defining a hash map. So this is how you would define a hash map, right? And again, it's just a variable with the curly braces. That's hash map. Now we're going to implement our first set of logic, which is iterating over the array itself, right? So that for I represents items. In nums is representing the array. That's why we wrote over here nums as the variable, right? And what we can say is if I is in H. Now, the reason why we do this is because we are actually going to be iterating, right? We're going to be iterating these numbers, right? We're going to be iterating these numbers. by 1, which just means we're going to be counting basically by 1, right? But we can't count a number which is not defined, which is undefined, right? You can't really count that number, right? This doesn't make any logical sense. So if our key value pair isn't defined, it wouldn't have a specific number because it could be any value. So by saying if I equals in age, it means that that key value pair has to be there, because by saying this, we're basically saying, hey, is this key, like the I, which is just iterating over this a loop, is it an age, right? Now, if it is, then we assume that the key value pair exists, so we can just iterate like we would, which is like this with this context. This would basically modify the value of I in the key value pair stored in the hash map. Now, otherwise, so this is if it does not exist, all we need to do is just initialize it with the value 1, because there is already one occurrence of it, right, which is this I, or this iteration of the I item in nums. All right. Now what we can do is now we're going to go on to the next for loop, which is this one. So that would be key value in now the dictionary, so H items, right? And so we're using the dot items so that we can actually get access to the key value pairs themselves. And all we're going to say is that if value equals 1, return the key, right? Because that has to be the single number based on how the question is phrased. Now, if I just go ahead and run this, as you can see, it works. And if I submit it, there you go. It has been accepted. All right. So yeah, that's it from me. And yeah, take care.